All right, Adam here for lesson 6, which is part 2 of what I call the canvas. And again, the canvas is for me, my art when it comes to DFS. And I do think DFS is a lot of an art and not exactly a science. That's where you have to embrace uncertainty and things like that. My canvas of how I project a slate to be, I want to have it mapped out in my head on a spreadsheet before I go put anything into the Bink machine so that I know when I put things into the Bink machine, it's doing exactly what I want. So this is me in 2024 week one building a sample of what this breakdown actually might look like. This is absolutely, I've intentionally, for my own personal sanity, did not try to pick the players and the teams and the stacks that I'm actually going to use week one. In fact, I picked people that I will absolutely not be using week one intentionally. And just in case you are just from a 1 week season standpoint, guess how much exposure I put in for Keenan Allen, just as a little giggle for you. It might be his role might be different with the Bears. But yeah, I put 54% exposure to Keenan Allen just so it's very clear. This is not what I would actually be doing, what I plan to actually be doing in week one of 2024. Again, for my own mental sanity. But a breakdown might look like this. So I have certain quarterbacks, and let's say I've got a player pool of 6 quarterbacks that have a total of 100% ownership. Cool. I have running backs, and remember, I specifically made a decision, at least, and I probably will do this for week one, where I do this type of thing where I limit my flex to only be wide receiver. And so if I say I want a wide receiver in the flex on every one of my rosters, that means my running back percentage better only be 200%. So this is an example of what a running back pool might look like. Again, don't worry about the players here. This isn't about the players. I have some players intentionally that I do not like. Same thing with wide receivers. So the wide receivers, I have a wide receiver in the flex. My wide receiver ownership needs to equal 400%. And again, like if I changed Alec Pierce's here to 22%, you'll see the formula change adds 4% to the total. And really important that you get all this right. Tight end, here's a breakdown. Here's 100%. And if I scroll over to defense, same thing. This is so important because it forces you to be very disciplined about your allocations of percentages for your players. During the week, I typically will say Thursday or Friday, I'll start saying how much I'm thinking. I think in a MME standpoint, so I think I'm probably going to play 20% Jonathan Taylor. And I actually have a little notepad on my phone. I start writing this stuff down. What do I think my exposure is going to look like? And I don't think about the numbers and make sure they add up. So I might say 20% Jonathan Taylor, 30% Bijan, 24% ETN, 60% Cook, 34% Ramondre. And then I go to actually put it in the spreadsheet like Saturday morning or Saturday evening. I put all these numbers in and I go, I don't want a running back in the flex. So that means I have to find a way to shave off 38% of rostership. I have to figure it out. If I don't figure it out, the optimizer, if I have 0 RB in the flex, which I want in this fictitious example, if I don't shave this down to 200% myself, the Bink machine is going to do it for me, and it's going to do it in a way that I am not in control of. So it forces you to be disciplined and saying, I've got to get this to 200%. And I challenge you to go through this discipline, and you will love your lineups when you go through this discipline. So I don't remember what my lineups were, what my percentages were before, but I've got to find a way to shave off percentages. Maybe I had like Bijan at like 10%, right? And I go Cook down 2%. I do Chuba down to 4%. Get Brian Robinson 2%, and now I'm there. You've got to be disciplined in getting your ownership to be this number. I think this is so important. And the reason why it's important is because if you don't do it, the optimizer is going to do it for you. You can't play 10 players on a roster. You can only play nine. Very, very important. Discipline yourself in this to say my ownership is going to match my ownership on a spreadsheet or on paper is going to match what it can absolutely be if I put 150 lineups in, so that when I put the stuff into the Bink machine, I don't make mistakes. You have got to do this. Okay, hammer that point home. The next thing that's really important in this is you need to understand how your allocations match your stacking. And I do this mentally for every single player, every single quarterback. For instance, I want 10% of Josh Allen. Uh, let's say that I want to double stack. I probably will double stack Josh Allen this week if I play Josh Allen. I probably will play Josh Allen. I want to double stack him in every lineup. That means I've got to have enough ownership or rostership on my Bills pass catchers. Let's just say I don't pick James. I'm not going to play James Cook in my Allen stacks. I could, right? And I could account for that. But just for the sake of simplicity, I have to make sure I have enough rostership on my Josh Allen stacks to have enough for two pass catchers. So that better be for two pass catchers, that's 20%, right? If I'm playing Josh Allen 10% of the time and I have two pass catchers, I have to have 20% rostership in my pass catchers. So here it is. I actually have them happen to be right here. Will Shakir 8, Keon Coleman 8, Curtis Samuel 12. If I add, by the way, I didn't, just for the sake of this, I didn't have Dalton Kincaid. Probably should if I was actually doing this. But just for the sake of simplicity, I have three pass catchers, a total cumulative ownership of or rostership of 28%. Now you have to understand what this means. What this means is 10% of my rosters are going to be Josh Allen doubles and across these three guys. And if I add these numbers together, that's 28%. That means there will be 8% of my lineups that have one of these guys without Josh Allen. Let me repeat that. Josh Allen, 10%, double stacks. I need to make sure I have 20% of my lineups or 20% of my pass catchers rostership. Otherwise, I can't do Josh Allen doubles if I don't have 20% total of my pass catchers. And because I have 28%, what that actually is implying is 8% of my rosters are going to have a Bills pass catcher without Josh Allen. A one-off. By the way, if I stacked Kyler Murray, and Kyler's not on here, and I force a bringback in all my Kyler Murray stacks, I better have enough ownership to account for that as well. So like if I added Kyler on here, let's do it. What's Kyler's price? 6,400. I like Kyler Murray. This is really good. It's a really important exercise to go through. I want Kyler Murray on 20% also. And let's just say I'm going to, nuke. I'm going to nuke Jaden Daniels just for the time being. I'll nuke him to 0. So I still have my 100%. And so my Josh Allen doubles are going to consist of 28%, these three guys 28% of the time. Or 20% of my rostership is going to be these three guys. I'll have 8% left over. If I force a bringback on my Kyler stacks, that means 20%. I need to have 20% of my rostership allocated to the bringbacks. And what that means is because I've limited how much my exposure is to these players, I'm not going to get It's the Bink machine is going to actually deflate their ownerships, their rostership percentages of Allen and or Murray because it's got to fit in the constraints of the wide receiver owner or pass catcher ownership. This is so important that you think through this. I can't play 10% Josh Allen doubles and 20% Kyler with the doubles or whatever with the bring back from the Bills if I don't have enough rostership to account for that. If this were to actually play out in real life, and what will probably happen if you allow the James Cook to be a bring back on the Kyler stack, every one of your lineups will have, you have your Josh Allen doubles. Every Kyler Murray, I bet almost all of the Kyler bringbacks are going to be James Cook because there's not much rostership to go around on the pass catchers left. And so you're gonna have a bunch of Bills, but only in the game environment. You're not gonna have Bills one-offs. And James Cook is going to be tied at the hip to Kyler Murray. That is what you're telling the optimizer. Hey, you go say, I want Josh Allen doubles, and I want every Kyler to have a bring back from the Bills, and you don't have enough rostership to account for all of that, it's going to do the type of forcing. And then you're going to be mad that all your James Cook lineups have Kyler Murray in them. And he went off for a big game, and Kyler didn't have a big game. You're going to be shooting yourself in the foot. And it's only because of the way what you told the optimizer. It's so important that you and I understand the math behind this. Otherwise, we're going to make mistakes and not like the mistakes we're making. I think the Bink machine's got problems, and it's not the machine, it was us. Another example of this, I intentionally added this. I have Kirk Cousins at 20% ownership. I would probably double stack Kirk Cousins. Uh, and let's say I don't put Bijan in there. In fact, just for the sake, let's say I don't roster any Bijan in this side, right? So I better make sure I have 20%. If I'm 20% Kirk Cousins doubles, that means I need a 40% rostership for his pass catchers. Uh, let's see what I got. I got 14% Drake London. I have 8% Darnell Mooney, so that's a total of 22%. And I have 0%. Again, I wouldn't do this in real life. I had 0% Kyle Pitts. Guess what? If I force a double stack on Kirk Cousins, I do a group, which we'll get into, or I do a group and I say Kirk Cousins must be stacked with two of his pass catchers. But I'm limiting how much exposure I have to each of these players. Guess what? I will not get 20%. It's just not mathematically possible. And so I encourage you to allocate all your percentages, make sure they fit, make sure they match. I discipline myself to do full numbers, exactly 100, exactly 200, exactly 400 in this case. And then I need to walk through my stacks and make sure that I've got enough allocation in how I want to handle these quarterback stacks so that I am not, so I'm doing, so that when I put it in the Bink machine, it doesn't give me things I don't. I need to make sure I have enough rostership in the people I'm pass catchers and maybe running backs that I'm stacking with my quarterbacks to account for the allocation that I need. The last thing I'll say on this is the implication of owner rostership of pass catchers outside of the quarterback. For instance, I did this as an extreme example, but I have Dak Prescott 20% ownership, rostership, and I have CeeDee Lamb 50% rostership. I probably in this type of situation would roster Dak, or I would tie CeeDee Lamb to every Dak roster. I probably don't want to stack Dak without CeeDee Lamb because he's such an alpha wide receiver. But you have to understand what this implies, right? This implies that I'm going to have 30% of my rosters with CeeDee Lamb without Dak. So he's going to be like a one-off play. Maybe in a secondary correlation, you could figure that out if you wanted to. But you need to understand what you're saying when you set these exposures. Dak Prescott 20%, CeeDee Lamb 50% means if I force every deck roster to have a CD lamb on it, that means CD lamb is going to be in 30% of my rosters without deck. Do I want that? And this is a common thing with high wide receivers. A lot of times you've got to have one off somewhere, right? Not everyone can be part of the stack, and so, but this will actually help you understand exactly where your one offs are going to live. So we didn't even get into the Bink machine on any of this. This is I call this your canvas. This is the place for you to clearly articulate how you want to break down a slate from an optimization standpoint and an exposure standpoint, a rostership standpoint, so that when you put it in the Bink machine, you're telling the Bink member, you tell the Bink machine what to do. And if you're not very clear and disciplined about that, then the Bink machine is going to have to make adjustments, and you may not like the adjustments it makes. And the problem was never the Bink machine's fault. It was your fault. That was lesson 2. I have a third short lesson on the canvas to make sure that you're allocating your salary correctly. And we'll do that, and then we'll actually start inputting the stuff into the Bink machine.